This is the painting I did in 2020 with watercolor, and on the right you see a new one in 2022. I would like to share with you what changed in those 2 years, what I learned so that you can change it too. Masking tape definitely helped a lot. In the beginning, I didn't know how to use masking tape, and now I'm using it all the time. This tape is amazing because it doesn't damage your paper, first of all, and second, look at this. I didn't have any frame around it, no white lines, but this one had a very nice looking frame which allows me to have a space to touch my painting without leaving my fingerprints. Also, it keeps your paper from bulging so that it doesn't create those hills and grooves. Wet on wet method made a difference for me. I did not know what wet on wet method was, so look at this. Please look at the sky in my 2020 painting. You can see the brush strokes. They are not even. But with wet on wet technique, in which you first wet your paper and then you apply your paint, I never get those brush strokes anymore. The paint spreads evenly and the transitions look much more natural, just like in this ocean part as well. Wet on dry method is something that I had to learn as well. In my old painting, you can see the flowers are not very distinct. They all look very, I would say, messy, no distinct structure. But with wet on dry technique, in which I have a wet paint on a dry paper, I was able to give more details of those flowers. I learned the importance of drying time. In the beginning, in 2020, I was not allowing my paint to dry at all. But now, as you can see what I'm doing here with the flowers and all the leaves, I allow them to dry first before I go in with the second color or second layer, or maybe even third or fourth colors. Here, for example, either I am allowing the other part to dry while I'm working on another part of the painting, or if I'm in rush, I just go grab my blow dryer and I just air blow all those paints so that they dry much more quickly this way. Brush choices made a big difference as well. In my previous 2020 painting, I did not care about my brush size at all, but here you can see that I'm using a very small number 2 brush. Now I am using a round middle brush here. I think it's number 7. And here you see that I use number 11 for the bigger areas. And again, it's a round brush, so I have a much sharp pointed tip, and I have my mop brush here. It allows me to use much more paint in my brush. This way I can draw larger areas. Definitely learning about these brushes and using them in different places helped me improve. Layering made a huge difference. So I did not know how to layer in 2020. Look at those walls. You see 1 or 2 tones maximum of the colors. You don't see any layers. It's just a single layer or maximum 2 layers. But in this painting in 2022, you see me making different layers, especially on the walls. This was the purple layer, and then after it dries, I did my blue, a little bit like purplish blue layer. And then after it dried, I go more blue, and once it dries, I go with a different color and I create my 3rd and 4th layers. This created in the end a beautiful looking, very realistic, but at the same time very watercolory, I call it dreamy wall structure in the end. You can see it right here in the circle. And also you can see the layering effect on the cobblestone as well. Look at that street now. This is only after 3 layers. I add more layers to it and pa-pam, you can see that it has more structure now and it looks more appealing right now with all these different colors. Not contouring also made a difference. In order to have natural looking borders, we need to create tone differences, just like in these 2 areas where you see the edges of the wall. But in my 2020 painting, you can see that I tried to give those with just black contour. Avoiding that will help a lot. Paying attention to details is something that I also created in these 2 years. I am adding more and more lines. There are more layers on those stones so that it's just going to have more 3D look. Look at the previous one in 2020 and in 2022. I have no details whatsoever in the first one. It's horrible. But you can see that I'm working with my smallest brush on those details in my 2022 painting. Especially the stones were very difficult because they had so many details. Not only those lines, but also the color differences, the shadows, and how the sun was reflecting what colors on those stones were important details. So I added all these details, purples, blues, greens, and yellows. That definitely improved my painting. Well, confidence made a difference. I mean, in these 2 years, I developed some techniques by myself, and also I improved some already existing techniques. Here, for example, in order to blend everything together very nicely and naturally, I went over this little street with a slightly yellow. I wanted to go over everything to give some warmth, and I thought if I went over those lines one more time with this water, everything would look more natural. Also, using white gouache for the waves or some other corrections in my paintings is something I developed in years as well. For example, here, in order to correct this area, I used white gouache very comfortably. And this kind of confidence gave me less anxiety while I am painting with watercolor. Of course, before you remove your masking tapes, you have to make sure that everything is dry, because then you might mess up your painting, which I did in my 2020 painting just a little bit. And once you remove it, it's all yours. You can see how much it changed in just 2 years, and I haven't done like hundreds of paintings yet. I cannot even imagine in the next 2 years what I'm going to have become, but of course I'm going to share with you guys. If you find this tutorial helpful, please share your opinions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you are interested in seeing more videos from my channel. If you're new in watercolor, I'm sure you're gonna find my video on the right, Watercolor Painting Basics for Beginners, very helpful. I'll see you there.